The world's two biggest superpowers are staring each other down. Not with tanks crossing borders, not with missiles flying through the sky, but with something much more dangerous, a silent test of power. Right now, deep inside government buildings in China, military strategists, economists, and political advisors are asking one critical question. Has America finally started to decline? And if the answer is yes, then the next question becomes even more terrifying. What happens next? Because for decades the United States dominated the global order. Its military was unmatched. Its economy shaped the world. Its currency controlled global trade. Its influence reached every continent. But today, cracks are starting to show. America is deeply divided politically. Its debt is exploding. Its allies are becoming uncertain. Its wars have drained resources, and internally, many Americans themselves are losing confidence in their own system. Meanwhile, China sees opportunity. A once poor nation has transformed into an economic giant. Its military is expanding rapidly. Its technology sector is becoming more aggressive. And its leadership believes history may finally be moving in their favor. But here's the real question. Does China actually think America is weak? Or is this all part of a larger strategy to reshape the world order? Today, we break down the hidden power struggle between the United States and China, the signals Beijing is watching carefully, and why many experts believe we are entering the most dangerous geopolitical era since the Cold War. And before we begin, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, this channel breaks down global conflicts, hidden power struggles, and the geopolitical stories shaping our future in a way that's simple, deep, and impossible to ignore. Now let's get into it. For most of modern history, the United States represented stability. After World War II, America emerged as the world's dominant superpower. Its economy exploded, its military spread across the globe, and the American-led international system became the backbone of global politics. Countries trusted the dollar, global trade depended on American naval power, and Washington became the center of international decision-making. Even China once accepted this reality. Back in the late 1970s, China was still economically weak. Millions lived in poverty. Its military was outdated. And compared to America, it was nowhere close to being a rival. But then something changed. China opened its economy. Factories exploded across the country. Foreign companies rushed in. And over the next 4 decades, China experienced one of the fastest economic rises in human history. Entire cities appeared almost overnight. Massive infrastructure projects transformed the country. Hundreds of millions escaped poverty. And while America focused on wars in the Middle East, China focused on long-term power. That difference matters. Because Beijing believes America became distracted. After the September 11th attacks, Washington spent trillions of dollars on conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq. These wars lasted years. They damaged America's reputation internationally, and they exhausted enormous financial and military resources. China watched carefully. In Beijing's eyes, America was burning energy overseas while China quietly built factories, ports, railways, technology networks, and global influence. And this is where China's strategic thinking becomes important. Chinese leadership does not view power the same way America does. The United States often thinks in election cycles, 4 years at a time. China thinks in decades, sometimes even centuries. The Chinese Communist Party studies history obsessively. They analyze how empires rise, how empires collapse, and how internal division weakens nations from within. That's why modern America looks extremely vulnerable from Beijing's perspective. Think about what China sees when it looks at the United States today. Political chaos, massive polarization, constant cultural conflict, growing distrust in institutions, rising crime in major cities, economic anxiety, and a government struggling to pass major policies without internal battles. To Chinese strategists, these are signs of decline, not collapse, but decline. And historically, declining powers become unpredictable. That's exactly why tensions are growing, because China believes time may finally be shifting in its favor. One of the biggest reasons China thinks America is weakening is economic pressure. The United States remains the largest economy in the world, but it also carries enormous debt. America's national debt has climbed to historic levels. Interest payments alone are becoming massive. and many economists warn that long-term financial stability could become a serious issue. China sees this as dangerous, not because America will suddenly collapse tomorrow. That's unlikely. But because debt weakens flexibility. A country drowning in financial pressure struggles to sustain endless global dominance. At the same time, China has spent years trying to reduce dependence on the American system. This is one of the most important geopolitical shifts happening right now. For decades, the US dollar dominated global trade. Oil transactions, international banking, and foreign reserves all relied heavily on the dollar. That gave Washington enormous power. If America sanctioned a country, it could cut them off financially from much of the world economy. China hates this dependency, so Beijing started building alternatives. It expanded trade agreements across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. It invested heavily through the Belt and Road Initiative. It strengthened partnerships with countries frustrated by Western influence. And slowly, China began pushing for more international trade using its own currency instead of the dollar. This matters because global power is not only about military strength, it's also about who controls systems, trade systems, financial systems, technology systems, supply chains. China believes America's dominance in these areas is becoming less stable than before, especially after recent global crises. The COVID era exposed massive weaknesses in supply chains. Many countries realized they depended too heavily on China for manufacturing. At the same time, China realized how much the world economy could be disrupted under pressure. Now both sides are preparing for long-term economic competition, and this rivalry is becoming more aggressive every year. But economics is only one side of the story. The military side may be even more dangerous. For years, America's military superiority was unquestioned. The U.S. Navy controlled major sea routes. American aircraft carriers projected power across the globe, and few nations could realistically challenge Washington directly. China understood this weakness very clearly, so instead of copying America exactly, it built a military designed specifically to challenge the United States in Asia. This is extremely important. China doesn't necessarily need to dominate the entire world militarily. It mainly wants regional superiority near its own borders, especially around Taiwan. Taiwan is the single most dangerous flashpoint in the US-China rivalry. China considers Taiwan part of its territory, but Taiwan operates as a self-governing democracy with strong unofficial support from the United States. For Beijing, Taiwan is not just political, it's emotional, historical, strategic. Chinese leadership believes reunification is inevitable, and many analysts believe Beijing thinks America may eventually become too divided or too weak to stop it. That's why China has massively expanded its military capabilities. New warships, advanced missiles, cyber warfare units, space technology, artificial intelligence systems, drone programs. China's military modernization has accelerated at stunning speed. And unlike America, China doesn't need military bases all over the world. It only needs enough regional power to make US intervention extremely costly. That changes calculations dramatically. Because if China can convince America that defending Taiwan would cause catastrophic losses, then deterrence starts shifting. This is exactly why tensions in the Pacific are growing more serious every year. Military drills are increasing, naval encounters are becoming more frequent, and both sides are preparing for scenarios they hope never happen. But here's what makes the situation even more dangerous. Both countries believe the other side is declining. America sees China facing economic slowdowns, demographic problems, and rising internal pressure. China sees America facing political division, debt crises, and weakening global credibility. When two superpowers both think time is against them, the risk of confrontation rises dramatically. Technology is another battlefield where China believes America's grip is weakening. For decades, the United States dominated technological innovation. Silicon Valley shaped the digital world. American companies led global software, semiconductors, and internet infrastructure. But China rapidly caught up. Companies like Huawei became global giants. Chinese AI development accelerated. Digital payment systems expanded rapidly. And China invested enormous amounts into advanced technologies. This shocked Washington, because technology is now directly tied to national power. Artificial intelligence can influence warfare. Semiconductors power modern weapons. Cyber capabilities can disrupt economies without firing a single shot. That's why the US-China tech war has become so intense. The United States restricted advanced chip exports to China. It pressured allies to block certain Chinese technologies. And it increasingly treated technological competition as a national security issue. China interpreted this as proof that America fears losing its edge. And from Beijing's perspective, that fear reveals weakness. Why? Because dominant powers rarely panic. Rising powers do. China believes America is reacting defensively because it knows the balance of power is changing. Whether that's true or not is heavily debated. But perception matters in geopolitics. Sometimes perception shapes reality itself. Another reason China thinks America looks weak is global credibility. For decades, U.S. alliances were extremely strong. Countries trusted Washington's leadership. American diplomacy shaped international institutions, and many nations aligned closely with the West. But recent years have created uncertainty. The chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan damaged America's image globally. Allies questioned long-term reliability. Political changes between administrations created inconsistent foreign policy signals. China watched all of this carefully. Beijing began presenting itself as a more stable long-term partner, especially in parts of Africa, the Middle East, and South America. Chinese investments expanded into developing nations. Infrastructure projects created influence. And many governments appreciated China's approach of avoiding lectures about internal politics. Meanwhile, anti-Western sentiment grew in several regions. This created opportunities for Beijing. Now China is actively trying to build a world less centered around American leadership, a multipolar world, a world where Washington no longer dominates every major decision. And slowly, some countries are beginning to hedge between the two powers instead of automatically siding with America. That shift matters enormously because global influence is partly psychological. Once countries believe a dominant power is declining, they start adjusting their behavior. That's how global orders begin changing, not overnight, but gradually. However, there's a major problem with China's assumptions. America still remains incredibly powerful, in many ways, stronger than any nation in history. The United States still has the world's most powerful military overall. Its universities remain dominant globally. The dollar still controls huge portions of global finance. American companies continue shaping technology and culture worldwide. And perhaps most importantly, America has powerful alliances. NATO remains strong. Japan supports Washington strategically. India is increasingly cautious about China's rise. Australia has strengthened military cooperation with the United States. China may believe America is weakening, but many experts argue Beijing may actually be underestimating American resilience. Historically, the United States has repeatedly recovered from crises, civil unrest, economic crashes, political scandals, wars. Yet America continues adapting. That uncertainty makes this rivalry extremely dangerous. Because miscalculation between superpowers can change history. If China overestimates America's weakness, it could trigger a conflict it cannot control. And if America underestimates China's ambitions, it could lose strategic influence far faster than expected. There's another layer to this story most people ignore: demographics. China faces enormous demographic challenges. Its population is aging rapidly. Birth rates are collapsing, and the workforce is beginning to shrink. This creates serious long-term risks for China's economy. An aging society means rising healthcare costs, slower growth, and increasing pressure on younger generations. Ironically, this may actually make China more aggressive in the short term. Why? Because some analysts believe Beijing sees a closing window of opportunity. If China believes its peak power may arrive within the next decade or two, then leadership could feel pressure to act before internal problems become worse. This is especially important regarding Taiwan. Some strategists fear China may calculate that waiting too long could reduce its future advantages. That's why global leaders are watching the Pacific so carefully right now, because the next 10 years may define the future balance of global power. And then there's the information war. Modern geopolitics is no longer fought only with weapons. It's fought through narratives, social media, propaganda, cyber influence, digital manipulation. China closely studies American internal conflict, every political division, every protest, every cultural battle. Why? because divided societies are easier to weaken strategically. At the same time, America highlights Chinese censorship, surveillance, and authoritarian control. Both nations increasingly see each other not just as competitors, but as ideological threats. That mindset is dangerous. During the original Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union viewed each other through existential lenses. Today, similar patterns are emerging again. Except this time, the economies of both rivals are deeply interconnected. That creates a strange paradox. China and America compete intensely, yet still depend heavily on each other economically. This makes full separation extremely difficult. But tensions continue growing anyway. Now here's the question nobody can answer with certainty. Is China correct? Is America truly weakening? Or is this simply another phase in a long historical cycle? The answer depends on perspective. If you compare America today to its absolute dominance after World War II, then yes, relative power has shifted. China has risen dramatically. Other regional powers have grown stronger. And the world is no longer fully unipolar. But decline is not the same as collapse. The United States still possesses enormous structural advantages: innovation, immigration, natural resources, global alliances, military reach, financial dominance. At the same time, China faces huge internal vulnerabilities many people underestimate: debt problems, real estate instability, population decline, youth unemployment, political rigidity. Both superpowers are stronger than they appear in some ways, and weaker than they appear in others. That's what makes this era so unpredictable. What's becoming clear, however, is that the world is entering a new geopolitical age. The era of unquestioned American dominance is fading, but the era of guaranteed Chinese dominance has not arrived either. Instead, we are moving toward intense competition between major powers, economically, militarily, technologically, ideologically, and every regional conflict now connects to this larger struggle: the South China Sea, Taiwan, semiconductor supply chains, cyber warfare, artificial intelligence. All of these are pieces of the same bigger story: a global power transition. Historically, transitions like this are dangerous. When rising powers challenge established powers, tensions often escalate. Ancient Athens and Sparta, Britain and Germany before World War I, America and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. History shows that fear, pride, and miscalculation can push nations into confrontation even when nobody truly wants war. That's why understanding this rivalry matters so much, because the decisions made in Washington and Beijing over the next decade could shape the future of the entire world. And maybe the most unsettling part of all this is that both countries believe they are acting defensively. America says it's protecting the international order. China says it's reclaiming its rightful place in history. Both see themselves as responding to threats. Both believe the other side is destabilizing the world. And when two superpowers each believe they are the victim, compromise becomes much harder. That's the reality we are entering now. Not necessarily a hot war tomorrow. Not guaranteed collapse. Not inevitable catastrophe. But a long, dangerous era of strategic rivalry unlike anything we've seen in generations. And the outcome is still unwritten. Maybe America adapts and remains dominant. Maybe China successfully reshapes the global order. Or maybe the future belongs to neither alone. But one thing is certain. The struggle between United States and China is no longer just about economics or trade. It's about who defines the future of the 21st century. And right now, Beijing believes the balance is finally starting to shift. The question is, are they right? If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more deep geopolitical analysis, global conflict coverage, and power shift documentaries. Because the world is changing faster than most people realize, and we're only getting started.